everyone? RogueGold here, welcome back to The Division 2. And today I want to deep dive on facts, theories, and more regarding the new Snow content teaser that the developers released last week. In case you missed the breakdown and everything going on there, I will link the video I did covering the news in the upper corner and down in the description. But ever since this thing dropped, it has drummed up a ton of community discussion, disagreements, and speculation on what the devs are really teasing. And so, today, I want to try and sift through it all. Now, based on the title of this video, some people may head into this video and discussion with certain emotions, right? For some, survival is all they've wanted in The Division 2 for years, and at this point, they don't want any more false hope. Other people are sick of hearing about it, and regardless of how they felt about the original, they're simply tired of hearing the devs respond to it. And furthermore, you have some who loved the original and want it to stay as it is and not be iterated on and continued on in any way, shape, or form. So I want to make very clear right off the top here, I am not making this video to try and be hyperbolic. I feel as though my views and videos over the years speak for themselves. I loved the original survival. I have always been open to the idea of bringing some form of that mode back. I think it brought tons of diverse gameplay moments, replayability, really fun PvP. However, I'm also not the kind of person who has interpreted every single vague sentence that we've gotten over the years as, oh my god, survival is coming back. And so, that said, the title to this video is exactly what it says. I am not saying that the new content is confirmed to be survival. I simply believe that this new content being some form of a survival successor is more likely than those who immediately shot down that notion may think it is. And I've come to that conclusion based on evidence, past developer comments, insights into trends and actions that the game has taken over the years. That said, obviously, these are still my own thoughts, perspective, speculation, so do not click off of this video thinking that Survival 2.0 is confirmed. It is not. But hopefully, you will hear out my ideas and respond with your own affirmations, counter-arguments, whatever, down in the comments below. I apologize for the long-winded intro there. I just wanted to really properly set the stage. As we jump in, I have to give a huge shout out and thank you to our channel members. Your continued support allows me to make these crazy rabbit hole dive videos like this one. It's greatly appreciated. But without further ado, let's get into this. Alright, so I want to begin with a brief recap on what the hell survival actually is. If you've never played The Division 1, you may be completely lost as to what I'm talking about right now. I'll keep this quick though, as I know many of you already know this. Survival was a 24-player mode in The Division 1. It saw you queuing into a recreation of the Manhattan map, except this time there is a whiteout blizzard. You've in fact lost all of your gear, progression, and stats that your character has built up to that point, and now you have a wound and infection that you need to counteract. Your goal is to make it to the Dark Zone to extract before you die of hypothermia, hunger, sickness, or the enemies that are roaming the streets. Survival had PvE and PvP options, adding to the intensity if you go with the latter one. And it was just a very fun, replayable experience with killer atmosphere and engaging gameplay. It really leaned on the Division's survival and looting roots. Exploration was also a huge factor in this mode, and it was considered by many to be an early pioneer in what would go on to become the juggernaut battle royale and extraction shooter genre, given that this came out in late 2016. And so while yes, it was very innovative and beloved, it was a paid add-on DLC to The Division 1, meaning that less players got to access and try it had it been free content, and so therefore that kind of led to it not getting the full spotlight and attention that it otherwise might have gotten. So, with all of those factors in mind, fast forward 9 years to now, why have we never gotten survival in The Division 2? Well, there's some opposing viewpoints here. Some people try and claim that it was never planned for survival to come to The Division 2, and it's not something that the devs would ever consider, and, well, that's actually not quite true. My go-to counterpoint is an interview that Julian Garrity, who you may know nowadays is the Division franchise's executive producer. Back then when this was conducted, he was the Division 2's creative director, as well as Matthias Carlson, who served as the Division 2's game director. They did this interview with SkillUp, who you might know nowadays as this huge industry-wide pundit and game reviewer. Well, back in the day, he was actually a Division-centric content creator. And so, at E3 2018, during the Division 2's grand reveal, he had an interview with these two discussing the game, its development and goals, all of that, and that gave us this clip. Take a look.
And I think personally, my absolute favorite part of The Division was survival. Any information on whether, can you confirm that as a feature is coming back, or is that still one of those, hey, we're seeing what's possible? Hand that back very carefully, not touching that one, you know?
I love survival.
Yeah, it's the best.
So, we're not talking about it, but I'd be incredibly surprised if it doesn't come back
Well, there we
to
go.
the
That's
division and Washington D.C.
very exciting. Okay, that's great. I'm actually super happy to hear that. Like, that's fantastic.
I think it's one of those things that, because we split the community, it wasn't quite,
Yes.
it didn't quite get the shine that it should have, and I think it's a shame because there's so many great emotions and player stories that come out of that mode that to give it a little bit more shine and visibility, put it on a pedestal a little bit, I think is something that we should be doing.
For sure, for sure.
So, this is kind of one of those saying it without saying it moments. You can tell from his wording that survival was in the plans for the Division 2. Obviously, though, we know that things happened. Later in 2019, after the Division 2 launch, Star Wars Outlaws got greenlit, part of the team got moved off onto that game. We all know the story from there. And then in the more current and modern Division 2 era, once the game came back to content, again, people claim that the developers have been very adamant that survival will never return. And I will admit that they've given certain comments, even in more recent streams, where they essentially say, stop talking about survival, it's not going to happen. However, if you watch these patterns over the years, as I have, it very much seems like a what day of the week are we asking kind of situation. Sometimes the answer is a firm no, sometimes it's a never say never. And what I like to go back to, and this is kind of where I believe the truth lies with this whole deal, is a comment from Yannick, the Division 2's current creative director. He's kind of guided this entire new Division 2 era, and this was a comment he gave shortly before the release of Season 9 when the game returned to live content. So Lieutenant Buzz Lightyear, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, he's a fellow content creator here on YouTube, used to do a bunch of Division stuff. He made this post on Twitter drumming up community sentiment and support to see survival back in the Division 2, and ended up getting over 500 likes, after which he tagged some of the devs and said, can we get some kind of response to this? And Yannick ended up replying. He said, over 500 likes deserves at least an answer, so here it is. I will consider bringing back survival the day I am 100% confident that we can deliver something better than the original. And again, as I said, I believe this statement. The developers love survival as much as we did. They would not want to go and risk tarnishing its legacy with some kind of inferior iteration. And so while it's not an absolute no that they would never do it, it's not something that they're trying to rush into doing anytime the resources become available. So, some people may think that that is the end of the story, but that is not actually the entire picture. There is one other wrinkle to this entire thing that has played a major role in the absence of survival in the Division 2, and it's one that I think people sometimes forget. That is the Division Heartland. As many of you likely remember, Heartland was a spin-off game in development by Red Storm Entertainment, who were previously a support studio on the Division 1 and 2. Now, once again, I'm just refuting a bunch of claims today, people sometimes try and say that Heartland was nothing like Survival, it was not a successor. Now, you can believe that if you want, it doesn't mean that that wasn't the devs' intention, though. This is a quote from Taylor Epperly, who served as game director for Heartland, and this is pulled from the developer deep dive that Ubisoft released for the game back in 2023.
I really think we've created something that the original survival players will recognize, while also innovating with open world operations, dynamic contamination.
So, there you have it. They very much viewed this as an evolution or successor to the original Survival. Now, another interesting point, if you did not know, Heartland actually began as content for the Division 2. We know this thanks to Ryan Smith, who nowadays works as lead level designer on Overwatch. He was previously a developer at Massive working on The Division, and after Heartland's cancellation last year, which we'll get to, he posted this on Twitter. I was part of the small team that started this in 2019. It was originally meant to be a low-risk BR mode for The Division 2. It had a pretty clear plan and was going well, but Ubisoft and Red Storm had other ideas, and it changed drastically. Sad that it won't ever see the light of day. Okay, so I know it took us a while to get here. I apologize. But the reason I wanted to lay all of that groundwork is that if you put all of these pieces together, with all of this context, it seems pretty clear to me that whatever Heartland began as at Massive is more than likely what Julian was referring to in that interview when he basically confirmed that Survival would return to the Division 2. However, as we all know, it then got spun off. And so the unspoken truth, while Heartland was in development these past many years, as long as that title existed, they would never go and make a survival adjacent mode in the Division 2, simply for the fact that they would be cannibalizing their own audience. Now, some people argue that Heartland itself did that right? Asking Division players to split their time between two titles, but at the very least they were offering different gameplay propositions. The Division 2 was looter-based, whereas Heartland was survival-based, and so despite all of the question asked on dev streams, social media, all of that, the Division 2 team was simply never going to be greenlit to make a survival mode so long as Heartland was around. Except now, it's not. Just over a year ago is when we got the news that the Division Heartland was canceled. This is in May of 2024, so just about 13 months ago. That timeline is actually going to become very important, so remember that overall framework. We'll come back to it. What I want to do now, though, is shift over to the actual teaser and image that we got last week, because this is where the conversation is all stemming from, and some may wonder, how are you extrapolating that survival could return to the game from this image alone? Well, the first important point to recognize is that concept art, which is what this is made very intentionally. You don't go to your concept artist and just say, hey, make something that looks cool, right? The creatives on a development team will come to the artist and say, we want to make X mode or this kind of experience in the game. We want you to make a rendering that embodies that and visualizes that concept. And so the first thing that stands out in this image to me, and I know a lot of you as well, given the conversation that's been going around online, is of course the snow. This is an entirely different biome and weather condition than anything we've ever seen in the Division 2. And I think it's also notable that snow can be used in imagery to convey a very pristine or beautiful look, but that is not the vibe that I get from this. When I look at this image, I think it's very much eerie and desolate. That's probably aided by the giant contamination tarp that is draped over the Capitol building here, which, by the way, it was confirmed to us that this is indeed the Capitol building by Pele, who is the game's lead art producer. That's the first thing that kind of reinforces to me that this could be survival. Whatever content or experience this is doesn't seem to be taking place in any kind of new play space. Instead, we're going to see them delivering a world that has been transformed, which is very much what survival did. And so overall, the snow and the overall layout of this image, it sets the tone, which is very much opposed to the Division 2's themes that it has always gone after, which is stuff like rebirth, rebuilding. This, in contrast, is very dark. That said, there's then also plenty of finer details to analyze in here as well. If we zoom into the agent that we have in this image, I'll scroll down over here so you can see them properly. In this image, we just have one solo Division agent. That may seem kind of insignificant, but it can actually point towards what kind of content this concept art is representing. For comparison, we got some very similarly drawn concept art for the Battle for Brooklyn DLC in the recent weeks. That artwork had 3 Division agents in there, just like in the key art had the 3, and so that's used to kind of enforce the co-op centric linear campaign that they were promoting. Additionally, you have concept art from the Descent game mode that we got all the way back in 2022. All of the artwork for Descent only contains one agent. It was later confirmed to us by the developers that Descent began development as a solos only mode. That was before they decided to go in and add co-op once that mode got delayed. And so again, just because this artwork only has the one agent right here, that does not confirm that whatever this is going to be solo only, but it is absolutely an intentional detail that there is one agent shown within this image. And if you'll recall back to the Division 1, survival had a big solo emphasis. You could play with your friends if you wanted to, but the thematics of it were very much you against the elements. And if we actually look at the agent here in question, again, it's a little bit hard to glean details because of how, small they are within the total picture, but they look a little bit undergeared. No, on their backpack or character here, there are no visible skills that I can see. There's no secondary weapon or specialization equipped, very much like the Brooklyn art had. All that we can really see is this one small backpack. They have some more winterized clothing and a singular hunting rifle looking weapon right here. And again, just like in survival back in the day, you start that mode with nothing, right? You have a pistol and the clothes on your back, and you have to venture out into the world and gear up with what you can. And so again, I'm not saying this is what it is, but this image and the look of this agent could be representing a similar form of progression. Another small detail that I've kind of noticed here, I know a few people have in the community as well. Up in front of the agent here, you have this small herd or family of deer. And again, details like these are not included for no reason. In many ways, it looks as though the agent's sightline is leading right to them, which could be interpreted that they are hunting them. And if that is to be the case, then that could be another indicator that this is a survival-like experience with you going out and hunting or collecting food. That could play into things. And I think that's another big thing to clarify. Saying that this content could be Survival 2.0 does not necessarily mean that it's going to be the exact same mode under the exact same parameters. In the Division 1, we saw them worsening the conditions of this world into a blizzard state. It then had us going into that blizzard and chasing antivirals. But in the Division 2, all we've ever known is summer. And there has been a lot of dialogue used in these past seasons that has emphasized the need for these settlements to prepare for the winter, right? That is a pretty big logistical obstacle to prepare for in this apocalyptic state. And so if this is going to be a survival-like mode, the overall objective could be very different while you're still under similar parameters to the original. Maybe, instead of a blizzard arriving, this is the first major snowfall of the year. And because of that, you're then sent out to go collect food or resources to help the settlement survive. Of course, once you're out there, you're contending with enemies and potentially other players who are going for those same resources. I think that is a perfectly plausible pitch that would very much be a survival-based experience, but it also has its own identity. It's not trying to just directly rip off of the original. Now, before we close out, I did say that I would come back to the timeline side of things, and that's because when this news dropped last week, I saw a lot of people saying, and I hinted at this myself in the initial breakdown video, stating that Battle for Brooklyn's release and potential success may have played a factor in the team getting to do or make whatever this is. And I bring that up because the more I thought about it, there is no way that that's the case. Now, don't get me wrong, Battle for Brooklyn may have played a role in them being able to share this news and artwork publicly, right, commit to doing it, but for something as significant as them bringing snow to the Division 2, I can guarantee you that there is not a chance in the world that they would risk sharing news like that with the community if they were not 100% confident that they could pull it off and release it. And I say that because there have been implications that doing snow in the Division 2 could be a big technical challenge. We've also heard Yannick comment on the complexity of changing an open world maps season. And also, as a side note, that's another reason why this likely could be a survival mode or another standalone kind of game mode, because I would bet you it is a lot more feasible to make snow on an isolated version of the DC map without all of the open world layers on top of that. Right? Just some food for thought. So, to think that between May 27th, the release of the DLC, and June 19th, when they shared this image, to think that within that window, they conceptualized, created concept art, and prototyped this snow-based content, and were then confident enough to share that with the public, I don't buy that for a second. But here is what I absolutely would buy. As we covered, the Division Heartland got canceled 13 months ago, meaning that in 2024, for the first time since 2019, the Division 2 team could at least consider doing something like survival in the game. Again, without having to worry about stepping on Heartland's toes and cannibalizing their own audience. We also know that later in 2024 is when Julian Garrity was able to come back to the franchise after the release of Star Wars Outlaws, and someone in that executive producer role could have major influence on big decisions like that, bringing survival back to the Division 2. Again, he stated loud and clear in that Skill Up interview that he has huge love for the Division 1's iteration of survival. And so, for the past year or so since those events went down, there may have been conversations, brainstorms, technological research, prototypes, artwork done. Maybe then as we get into 2025 in the recent months, plans could have solidified a little bit. There was a unified vision found for this content or mode. And then, once Brooklyn launched and they saw how well it did, which again, we don't have those figures, but presumably it did pretty well, that is what then gave them the confirmation behind the scenes that they would have the update runway and the budget to make this content happen, now that the resources had been freed up for making the DLC. And so, that then takes us to last week, where they're finally able to share the news and tease it to the community. To be perfectly clear, that is purely my own speculation, but it seems completely plausible to me. Now, to be fair, I'm going to play devil's advocate, because we have had developer comments since Heartland's cancellation last year that survival is still not something that they're looking into. One great example is this clip from DJ Tickle's interview with Yannick during the trip that we all took to Massive back in April. I'll leave a link for this interview in the description in case you want to check it out. He asked a lot of great questions, got a lot of good answers, but take a look at this.
We also have very fond memories of survival, right? So like the players talk about it all the time. The community constantly talks about how they would love to see survival in the Division 2. Obviously, these are discussions we also have on a regular basis on, like, you know, would it be a good idea? Is now the time? And how would we do that? But it's still not something that we are planning to do. But yeah, there's been multiple conversations in the past on like whether or not we should do it.
So, if you want to take his word for it, that is a completely reasonable and absolutely logical approach to take. And look, Yannick, if you happen to be watching this video, I respect you, I admire your leadership, but my friends, what else have we gotten firm no's on for the Division 2 over time? People said, hey, could we get more stash space? No, except we then got 50 slots in Year 6 Season 3 and 50 additional slots this season. People said, hey, could we get one-strap backpacks like we had in the Division 1? No, except then we got them this season. People said, hey, can we get snow in the Division 2? They said hard no, and yet we then get this concept art from last week. So look, I'm not going to advocate that we start distrusting official statements and comments. That is a slippery slope that will likely often lead to disappointment. But in this one specific case, I do not know if a no plans for survival comment can be 100% trustworthy. That said, whatever this new content, update, or change is that is coming to the game, the devs certainly seem very excited about it. Julian took a break from the Division 3 to retweet the news and go around liking various posts and videos regarding it. Beersy, for those of you who don't know, he is the Division 2's new game director as of a few months ago. Back on Thursday, he was replying to a ton of posts and speculative ideas that the community was throwing out, even ones that were specifically referencing survival, and people saying that they don't want to get their hopes up despite the suggestive artwork. I'll let his responses there speak for themselves. So, at the end of the day, whatever this ends up being, chances are it's going to be pretty exciting. But that is just about all I've got. I've presented my evidence and findings as for why I think it is plausible that this could indeed be a survival successor mode all of these years later. But again, as I showed you, in recent times, the devs have said that they're not making that. So one more time, to be clear, I could be 100% wrong. This could end up being something entirely different. And I would say I'll eat my words when and if I'm wrong, but again, I'm not saying that this is Survival 2.0. I simply think that the chances of it being that are higher than some people may be admitting. Well, there you have it. That is all I've got for today, my friends. I know it was a long one. If you made it to the end, I appreciate you, and I very much hope you enjoyed this dive down the rabbit hole. I'm done talking. I'm going to turn it all over to you. Whatever thoughts you have about this artwork that we got last week, whatever responses you may have to the ideas I've pitched in this video, and whatever your own theories are, I would love to hear any and all of it down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video and you don't want to miss out on more Division 2 content from me moving forward, including whenever we learn what this new mode or content really is, then I would appreciate you clicking that subscribe button if you're not a part of our community here already. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. RogueGold out.